Hi, it's Mike from MusicRadar. We're here with James Bay at the Gibson brand showroom, and he is here with his brand new 1966 signature Century. So James, what first drew you to the Century model?
What first drew me to it? I remember I was in a guitar shop in New York in the Village, in Greenwich Village, and it was my first musical trip to America. I'd only ever been to America once before that, which was just on a family holiday, and then I went over there to play for a label actually that I was meeting up with, and obviously the first thing I wanted to do when I had any free time, not hanging out with the label, was to go to a guitar store. So I went to this place, Matt Umanov Guitars, and I walked in there, and it's a great shop with lots of cool new stuff on one side of the shop and some great acoustic guitars, and then on the other side of the shop behind the counter there's all the cool old stuff. And I love old Strats, I love old kind of solid body electric guitars, but I was like sort of a lot of people in recent years, we've all been quite sort of drawn to hollow body electric instruments like this, and I saw it up there. There was a lot of like 335s and 330s and sort of classic sort of sunbursts, and this was up there all red and looking just a bit more kind of simple. And it's sort of like a lot of those old acoustic guitars that didn't have a sound hole but had F-holes. It initially kind of caught me like that. And I was drawn to it for those reasons, but I was drawn to it completely because it had a pickup in the middle as well. And I thought, that's interesting because I could see the wooden bridge, which again is not it's not individual metal saddles like a normal kind of electric guitar or like most traditional electric guitars. So it was this weird, sort of simple, unassuming sort of electric guitar. And I like, I've sort of said this before about this guitar and these types of guitars. I do like people like Jack White and Dan Auerbach, and there's lots of others as well who've plugged these things in, turned them up, and they get all this feedback and all this growl and all this like sort of body sound. And so I those are the things that sort of drew me to it the most. It looked like a challenge. It looked like it might be a bit difficult, but if I hit it hard and turn it up loud, it might kind of sound good. And then at the same time, when I did eventually get it, I was drawn to it also because you can play it like a very acoustic instrument, and you can plug it in and be kind of delicate with it, and it still sort of makes an interesting, very sort of organic sound. Yeah.
So you say you sort of fight against the guitar. Has that affected the way you play? Has that sort of shaped your whole style?
Yeah, I think weirdly, I've been a Stones fan since I was a little kid. And discovered lots of other music since then. I've mentioned people like Dan Auerbach and the Black Keys and people like Jack White, and even in the band's music I've sort of heard a lot of that. It's like, I suppose, when Bob Dylan went electric, he went from being very much of sort of an acoustic and unplugged artist to sort of cranking amps and getting a lot of bite and fighting with a genre, like fighting with what he, I suppose, felt traditionally he should be or was. And I found, I'm by no means making a comparison between myself and Bob Dylan, but I guess like so many others, I really do enjoy the sort of contrast between being, making, up until this point, like I have done, making quite sort of heartfelt music and quite intimate music on a less, on an instrument that you sort of wouldn't expect to usually make that kind of music on. Traditionally you'd expect it would be a standard acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've enjoyed the sort of the battle, the kind of, because what it meant is like I wrote a lot of the songs from my first album on this guitar in quite an intimate setting, and a lot of them were quite intimate songs, but I kept with this guitar when it came to playing them live and playing with a band and turning amps up. I stayed with this because the sound, it was coming from the same place. The songs could come from the same place, but the sound could develop and be a bit different. I just sort of enjoy those two things sort of rubbing against each other.
Yeah. And I mean, as you say, it's quite a simple guitar, but the rest of your rig is fairly fairly advanced.
It got quite involved actually, and I don't really mind that. I was definitely more of a sort of, I was less interested in pedals and amps and things once upon a time, and even if I'm more interested now, I still don't know a lot, and I enjoy the mystery of sort of plugging in to something that people say is a bit wild and a bit sort of weird sounding, or just has a sort of sweet tone when you turn it up, or so as far as amps and pedals go. And yeah, now I've kind of I developed it actually. We sort of stopped touring that first album, finished touring that first album 6 months ago, and at the end of it all, I was at a place where I was 2 or 3 amps on stage, which was I enjoyed the sort of mash of sounds. Sometimes, as I say, sometimes it was 3 amps just for sheer sort of power and wanting to be that much of a sort of sonic force. But yeah, I was getting into different reverbs and different types of delays and different types of tremolos and choruses and things like that. And they all come through this quite acoustic electric guitar in a really interesting way. Yeah, and I think I was on that journey that a lot of people have been on, obviously, but for the first time myself. So it's been, my rig has developed, and it's all a bit more involved, and it'll change again, I'm sure. I'm sort of excited to see where I go with it next and where I can go with it next, and how it relates to this guitar as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you got any new additions to the setup now?
To the setup and the musical family, the tools. What have I been using lately? I mean, I'm still all about P90s. I've been trying out a few solid body guitars as well, but this still features the Century still features, and my original '66 Century still features in a big way. Fuzz pedals, actually. That's a sort of initially quite a sort of harrowing like noise, I think, when you get a fuzz pedal going through something like this. But to get a bit specific, there's something cool that I've enjoyed about getting fuzz sounds coming through this guitar, then putting them back in the mix of a record, of a recording, and then going a lot cleaner but louder, with this kind of guitar, up front in the mix, and just getting all the body and all of the air and all of the sort of woody sound. So it sort of continues to develop in that way. There's a lot more kind of shorter spring reverbs and slapback. Slapback is something that I realised I barely touched it on the first record. And as I move forward now in new music, again, a guitar like this with a bit of slapback sounds incredible. And I get more percussive with my playing. I don't know, maybe not percussive, but just sort of choppier, and there's more left hand music and stuff. So it's interesting going on that journey, and there's sort of new things featuring. I'm trying to think, like, there's definitely like chorus and stuff going on too. But I love all those modulations. When a chorus like starts falling out of tune and then comes back in and sort of moves in waves, that sort of sound. Again, like, it's sounding cool with this guitar, so I'm sort of sticking with this on the journey. Yeah,
brilliant. So you're using that on? Are you recording the new album?
I'm writing, I'm recording, I'm working on it, and like I say, there are other guitars involved, just so that, because I'm so used to this, so I can sort of do something more unfamiliar. But I suppose half the reason that I've been sort of lucky enough to get to a point where there's now a signature of mine of this guitar is because I love it, and I keep falling back to it. It's still relevant for me in my music. So yes, it still features in a big way.
Yeah. Great. So how did Epiphone first approach you about doing a signature model?
I think really what it was born out of was the amount that I kind of, in the 3 years that we toured my first album, Chaos and the Calm, the amount that I got around with this guitar only, basically. If you saw me anywhere, I probably had this guitar. If it wasn't, it would have been a sort of traditional acoustic guitar, but it became less and less that, and more just me stood with this guitar. And I think we kind of came together because they noticed that, and the Century, the Epiphone Century, they stopped making it in 1970 or 71, I think. They made it for like approximately, I think, 10 years in the 60s. And I remember reading, talking to Jim from Epiphone, and there was 1 year in the 60s where they made 11 Centuries that came off the production line. There was 1 year where they made like 3. I think in '66 they made about 300. But these guitars were born out of, I think it was when Gibson sort of first bought Epiphone on, and these were made up of old parts from the Epiphone factory, and Gibson were kind of trying to do something. I think that's right. I'll try not to sort of misquote history, so feel free to sort of Google that. But no, we can't. So we came together in the respect of the fact that this is an honor for me in itself. They recognised that this guitar that they didn't really even know that well themselves anymore. Was kind of becoming familiar to my fans and people interested in my music sort of all over the world. So the idea was born out of that to try out a signature model.
And so what was the process like? What were the first steps?
It was good. It was very organic, and it was very kind of chilled out, and it was nice. Jim, we were on tour in San Francisco. We were on the West Coast, I think, sort of the north part of California, going maybe towards San Francisco or somewhere like that. And Jim came out from Nashville, and he'd been there. I think he lives in California now, but he'd been there, and he'd been back into California, and then he came up to see me to get to it basically, and talk about a few details, but measure up my original '66 one, and to talk about details like the strap. The strap is obviously a sort of one of the more unique extras, but to talk about the use of the noiseless P90 as well, which is very much like a sort of development in that I don't think they had them in the 60s. I don't think a noiseless P90 was a thing back then. So he was interested to sort of learn that it's what I use. The original reason that I started using the noiseless P90 was also that I had the original P90 in this guitar when I bought it, and I used it for about 18 months, maybe even longer than that. And it just gave up after a while. And I thought it's time to kind of retire that. A, because I sort of want to try and conquer some of the buzz by trying a noiseless one, and B, because it was kind of just time. Yeah. But we got straight into it basically. We met, and I showed him the guitar, and he measured it up, took all the right photos, and took all that info back to the sort of the workshop, and they took it from there.
Yeah. So when did you see the first sort of finished article? The
first finished article was sometime in the last sort of 6 months, I think, because there was prototypes on the way towards that first finished article. I really wanted to get the red right. I really wanted to get the sort of the shade right, because there are various shades and hues. I think it was a bit orange initially, and it needed to be a bit more brick red. But yeah, it was more like the beginning of 2017, sometime around then, and it was a slightly sort of speechless moment. I think the reality when it hits you that, and this is as you know as well, this is a slightly sort of geeky music thing. Yeah. But when you do sort of put it out of the case for the first time, it's quite a moment, and a sort of quietly kind of breathtaking moment where, because I was a kid at school playing guitar and sort of reading guitar magazines and sort of looking at all these people putting out signatures and stuff and following guitarists who'd done the same thing, and suddenly, 6 months before now, for the first time I've kind of got my own one. So it was quite a moment.
Yeah, I bet. And so what's next for you? What's coming from James Bay?
New music. New music is on the way. It's being made right now. I'm kind of busy. I'm having a good time being sort of privately busy making new music, and sort of obviously keeping that to myself for the minute, perfecting songs and sounds and all that sort of stuff, and working out what the next sort of version of me is going to be, which is an exciting thing. So that's about as much as I can say about that, but it certainly takes a lot of time, and it's fun to take time. I have some time at the moment. It's fun to take time with it, and to really work it out, and go into deeper and deeper detail. But at the same time, the more I do that, it's just weird how this one thing perpetuates the other. As I do it more, the more I want to get out on the road and play. I've just sat at home, had a nice weekend, between sort of time in the studio, watching Glastonbury. And I'm just jealous of everybody there. And it's not just because I'd love to go to Glastonbury. I want to be on those stages again, and so I'm working away and getting ready to come back with new music. Yeah.
Great. Well, we can't wait to hear it.
Very cool.
Cool. Thanks very much, James.
No worries.
Mike from MusicRadar. Cheers.